So there's a headline that has irked you a little bit.
It has.
Chemelil Muhoroni Sugar Millers merger plan splits stakeholders.
Yes.
Start with the story.
Stories like this.
Yes.
A proposal by Treasury to merge Chemelil and Muhoroni sugar companies has elicited mixed reactions. I am part of that mix, as the government embarks on a new trajectory to revamp the once vibrant state-owned factories. Now, what the government seeks to do is this. They're saying, for these factories to be viable, they need a minimum cane catchment, meaning the area where this cane is planted, to be 29,914 hectares. That is the proposal. That should be the minimum. Minimum kabisa.
Okay.
Now, as things happen, Chemelil only has 18,487. Muhoroni has 22,084 hectares.
Right.
Okay.
All right? Now, it makes sense because if you look at Nzoia has 49,862. Sony has 31,515. So at that point, you say, if that is what you're using as for example, it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
And these ones, they say, can function independently. Then comes in Miwani Sugar Factory, which they're also saying can function independently once it's revamped. But Miwani Sugar Company only has a catchment of 9,143. So, this yardstick you're using already eco default.
Yep.
So this one of Miwani will be merged with the Chemelil and Muhoroni?
No, it will be leased, but it will operate independently.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So, they're saying that if you are looking at this particular logic, it's like you're saying that the non-viability of these factories was due to the size of land that it had available for planting cane. And when you heard me raising my voice, I was saying, no, it's not true. It is not the only reason. It is not the only reason. Planting sugarcane and growing sugarcane the way we do in Kenya economically is actually not viable. Let me repeat it again. It is not viable. If the government doesn't intervene, we cannot actually even compete on the world stage.
What kind of interventions are we talking about here that needs? So what's the current situation in terms of how cane is grown in Kenya today vis-a-vis what needs to happen in order for it to be viable?
Okay, let's look at Kenana. This is in Sudan here. Yes, Sudan. Here. You see where I'm pointing?
I can see.
Okay, yes.
Right.
That sugar factory is fully mechanized. And if you had all the sugar factories in Kenya, all, and put them in one place, they don't even feature to be a fraction of what they have. I'm talking economies of scale.
Okay.
Now, if you look at the sugar plantations in Brazil and other places, size alone, so economies of scale, 1. 2, what they use the cane for is not to produce the sugar that we had in our tea. No. It's used for fuel.
Yes.
The extract, the bagasse, it's used again for fuel. Meaning, in that same factory, this very waste is again utilized as fuel to run that very same factory. What I'm saying is, the government factories that we have, Muhoroni, Chemelil, didn't do that. Them, they existed to produce white sugar. Now that, yes, at some point then they didn't change. So you then had agrochemical next to Muhoroni, which then use some of that produce to produce alcohol, which is used for methylated spirit, blah, blah, and so forth. I'm saying the government-run factories are not viable so long as what they were doing before is what they're doing.
So what intervention do you then need from the government?
The intervention that the government needs is to stop talking about hectares alone and to ask what is it that makes a viable sugar factory, because Kibos is just in that same constituency. It's a privately owned factory and it's viable. What are they doing? I am saying the merger seems to focus on the size of land needed to be able to make them viable. I'm saying that is not the entire story.
Okay.
Yes.
It may not be the entire story,
Yes.
but is it possible to be part of the story?
No.
If we say that we merge them, then you get this expanded acreage.
Yes.
And then you do all those other things. Would it help?
The expanded...
Conversely,
yes.
if we say that you just leave Muhoroni the way it is right now and you leave Chemelil the way they are right now and you operate them separately, would it make sense? You just give us the example of Sudan, economies of scale. It makes them work better.
Yes.
What's wrong with these ones? If we say, let's merge these two, okay? And then we have a bigger catchment area of where we're getting our sugar cane from, where our raw material from.
Yes.
And then we also work on the efficiency of the operations,
Yes.
such that we are producing more, we are getting more products out of it.
Okay. Let's even start.
What's wrong with that whole?
These factories are over 60 years old, many of them. They are ancient, old, they are actually outdated. So step number one, the things I'm talking about cannot actually be done with the factories as they currently are. You need to change those factories.
Okay.
And revamp them, make them new.
Okay.
What you suggest could actually work, because our sugar is produced to be consumed locally. We don't really export sugar. If anything, what we produce is inadequate. That's why we have to keep importing. There's a quota that has to be imported. But that quota is misused, and what gets imported sometimes is even more than what is produced locally.
Right.
And what is produced locally is hampered by not just the inefficiencies, but the misdeeds that occur in that industry. Every time these factories have been put under receivership, for some strange reason, they seem to function. The moment they're taken back to the so-called regular management, they dip again. What I'm saying is, as you talk about acreage, it can't be the only story you're talking about, because you haven't even explained how it is the acreage that they have been optimally utilized for it to be inadequate. That has not been said. And these factories are older than the other factories you're talking about. Probably one is older than the other two.
So then obviously the issue of revamping comes into play.
Yes.
And
rethinking the whole thing, not just revamping
Yeah,
it.
because now you're talking about a product. It's because cane is not sugar. From what you've said, sugar is a byproduct
Product.
of the cane.
Yes.
And there are other things which, if you look at on a grander scale, Kenya could actually be benefiting from quite significantly if now that was actually focused on. In order to derive these benefits from cane and to do it on a large scale, that realization has to come about, clear in the minds of everybody, even if it, assuming in some that it is not. Number two, you also have to see the benefits on a global level. Now, global doesn't mean necessarily the world, but global means overall. Here, seeing what can all of these companies that exist in the country today actually do with what they have. The possibility of Kenya providing all its sugar needs, as well as export needs, export quota, and not just for sugar, but for the energy that comes from it, etc., is there. The possibility is there.
It's there.
The realization of using what you have to get there, I think, is where now the sticking happens. And now when you mix it in this lovely pot of mismanagement and impunity and corruption, you have a fantastic recipe for disaster, which we've already experienced.
Mumias actually got there. Mumias went even beyond just gasohol. Mumias were producing power. Meaning, they did a complete 360.
Yep.
Okay. And then God alone knows what happened, and things went left and right and up and down, and we are where we are today.
They did another 360.
Yes. Look at Butali Sugar. I mean, just look at factories which are private and they work. Part of the reason why they work is that their catchment area, forget their own land. Independent cane farmers like yours truly here would rather sell his cane to Kibos, which will pay you less, but they'll pay you quicker. You see? So all I'm saying is, this whole industry needs to be rethought, not just retooled, revamped, rethought. It's one of those cash crops that benefited the Mwananchi. It's not like coffee or tea, which is actually an export crop. No. This one, the Mwananchi who grows it benefited directly from it.
So can the problems being faced today and the problems that have been historically faced then be pegged completely to mismanagement?
Yes.
Completely?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I'm
because in
laughing.
terms of awareness of what can actually be done, that's clear. Because you see examples of, like you talked about, the gas being created, energy, fuel, etc., etc. People have done it, so the awareness is not the problem. Again, we come down to mismanagement. So it comes down to a thing of, if you really want to, you will do something with this thing.
The moment you have sugar factories and people who grow cane benefiting from it, and you can see what it is that is done, what needs to be done is known. It's not in the realm of the unknown. That's really what I am saying.
But why is it that this conversation always keeps coming back?
Yeah.
Even last week when the president was in Western Kenya, the sugar conversation dominated everything.
Because it is one of the few cash crops that those regions have where farmers actually used to benefit directly from.
Okay, so why aren't they benefiting? So many years, so many government bailouts and all.
The factories died. This mismanagement was actually theft, because
It allowed them to die.
For the longest time, even when you were told that the factory has a problem, you did not find mountains of sugar that hadn't been sold. All the sugar was always sold. Whatever was produced was sold. And yet, you grow cane, 18 months it's harvested. You wait another 2 years before you're paid. Man, in between you're going to die. If that's what you're depending on. The reason why farmers stopped growing cane, people like myself, is for that reason. It's a complete waste of your time.
You don't make something out of it. City.
If you do the maths, once upon a time you used to. Now, you wouldn't.
Would you support a plan to privatize these companies?
Yes, I would. But the privatization must give the independent farmers a stake in that privatization. Meaning, because we have land, our land is the equity, they must have a say in that privatization. That I would support.
So the company should be owned by the farmers.
Yes, it should be owned. If there's an investor wants to come in, they will have their share. But the farmer who also has land will also have a share in that.
So they'll have a shareholding.
Yes, they will have a shareholding.
Minority or majority?
Of necessity, it will be a minority.
Okay.
But it's a shareholding.
So bring in a private investor.
Yes.
Give them majority shareholding in this. They invest in modernizing this factory.
Completely.
Invest in modernizing the operations.
Yes.
Engage the minority shareholder who's a farmer to grow the cane.
Yes, exactly.
So the outgrowers are part of owners.
Yes,
of this.
yes. Once upon a time they were actually.
Okay.
Yes.
So what is the current plan? I feel like this is a matter that's before the Finance Committee of the National Assembly, that is pleading stakeholders such as farmers and others. And it's based on a memorandum by the National Treasury.
Yes.
On what they say, okay, maybe this could be the blueprint for making Muhoroni and Chemelil work. One of the things is let's merge them so that we are basically merging the catchment and make the outgrowers of this and the outgrowers of this contribute to this one big company. Not necessarily meaning that we close down Chemelil and only operate Muhoroni. It could be operate both, but under one entity. But then do we know the details of this memorandum?
No, we don't know the details. So I am fighting what I'm reading.
You just
yes,
saw,
I saw this one. My
merger.
I said, forget it. By the way, Muhoroni and Chemelil are just neighbors. They merge into each other.
It's just the word merger.
That one.
You're not alone.
No, it spells doom.
Your MP for Muhoroni, Onyango Koyo, says the government should instead think of replacing the old machinery and embrace modern farming methods to turn around the fortunes of the turbulent industry. Instead of what? Instead of merging.
We have, this country is a beautiful country in many ways. There is a research unit for the sugar industry.
Yeah.
It's a very lucrative research unit. And believe me, if we did the work we do in the sugar industry based on what they do, others do, by the way, some of these private companies, they do. They know cane, which doesn't need 18 months to grow. Some a year, some even 8 months. The one which produces high yield in sugar. They know all these things. Now that's modernizing, making sure that your process is informed by data, it's informed by research. But that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. The whole process of you grow your cane, it's harvested, you wait for a check. It is a tedious process.
Stories.
I'm interested in, because we heard this story all the time, that people would borrow money even to plant the cane. The cane is harvested and then taken to the millers.
Yes.
In terms of waiting for payment, it would take, it would take yonks. You pay back the loan by some other means. You were banking on the cane for many things, school fees, etc., etc. What was the problem that was not seeing cane farmers being paid after they took their cane to the miller? Because, like you said, you would never go to millers and find huge heaps of sugar sitting there.
No, you wouldn't.
Right?
Yes.
Because we know that the bulk of the sales from cane was in sugar.
You prepay for your sugar.
Right.
You don't come on the day that you want sugar and you pay.
Yeah, what I'm saying
it's
is
not retail.
Yeah, what I'm saying is we know for a fact that the bulk of the money that came from cane was not in biogas. It was not in energy. It was in sugar. You would not go to the millers and find heaps of sugar.
No.
So that means that they were selling it.
Yes.
So why then were farmers not being paid and paid on time.
That's where the mismanagement that we often, that the name mismanagement that is actually a pseudonym for corruption comes in. And the reason why I'm huffing and puffing is because I know over time when these smallholder sugar farmers with that 2.5 acres, 5 acres and so forth were taking not only their children to school, but they're able to make a living out of it because it was harvested. The fertilizer was brought on time. You got your check on time. Everything worked. And if you needed an advance, like in Tamu, there used to be an office for Musoko, which is the circle for the sugarcane farmers. You could go there and apply. Within a week, you'd have your check because they understood your acreage. They knew what you are likely to get. Meaning it was organized. It's against this background that you hear me saying what I'm saying. I saw it working.
So then,
I witnessed it working.
But
So
you're
then
fighting any idea of reviving it.
then I'm
No, I'm
inclined
fighting
to,
a half-baked idea, which is being reported half-baked. I'm not hearing a wholesome way of reviving the industry. I'm not hearing it.
I'm inclined to agree with CT because they've seen this thing work. They've
Yes.
seen it work
Yes.
without this merging or whatever.
Without all these many new
and
stories,
why did
yes.
it work at the time that it worked? Because the management, or at least for a period of time, then was end to end.
Yes, it was.
And it was proper. And people were being paid when they were supposed to be paid. People were then able to reverse the cycle. We're not dealing with issues like infertility of the land. It's the sugar belt, for crying out loud. The land is fertile. We can continue to grow this thing. It works. There is obviously a problem. We can do better, value-added services, etc., etc. But we're trying to not make the bed and put a blanket on top of it without dealing with the problem that lies underneath. So merging the 2 or 3 or how many ever would be great because you have more acreage and you can do whatever you need to. But that's not the core problem.
If you have the same problems that you've had and you merge them, what will have changed?
You have a bigger problem.
Nothing will have changed. I'm saying, if there is, and Eric, you have a valid point in that we don't know the full story. We haven't read the entire memorandum. So the person in this ministry of Treasury, we will look for them and come so that they can come and explain what this plan is. But my knee-jerk reaction when I read this, forget about it. That thing, nope.
It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't.
A
And
sugarcane farmer.
it seems the local MP is also unaware. Because when the local MP appeared before this, he said, instead of telling us about merger, you should be telling us about replacing the old machinery, embracing modern farming methods, and turn around the fortunes. The local MCA for Miwani, Geoffrey Warindu, says the proposed merger is of no consequence, while when more than 70,000 acres of land continue to lie fallow.
Yes.
We are concerned that thousands of people will lose their jobs while a single entity could exploit farmers by setting lower prices of cane. That's if you merge those two, then they operate under one, then
What you've done, you've merged all the nonsense that was in both those factors into one. And if the farmer was being disadvantaged, how do you explain a situation where farming, which was intended to benefit you, now becomes a net loss-making enterprise and you're guaranteed poverty if you're a sugarcane farmer? How does that work? Why would you bother going into it?
of course you wouldn't.
People like City Muga are not growing cane because it's a net loss-making
Yours
enterprise.
is one of the 70,000 acres that are lying fallow.
Yes.
I think what I was hoping to hear from the local leaders is this is our blueprint. And then compare it with this is the Treasury proposal, this is our proposal, and we say, no, amend this and this and this. And you as a committee, Kuria Kimani's Committee of Planning in the National Assembly, take this to the House.
Eric,
And say, this is what we want.
the areas who
Treasury
grow
to do.
cane have come up with those blueprints many times. Just let me explain to you.
And then?
They have. Nothing happened. I'm telling you, it's not just Moroni, it's Nzoia. All these, the people who represent people in those areas have discussed these things before and said, folks, this is what we'd like you to do.
Because it was just a blueprint,
Yes.
and it was not actually a plan of action. It was like, okay, let's do the swanky thing and make it look as though we know what we're doing. But you don't take the blueprint and you don't apply any action to it, and then you don't have any mechanisms for implementation. Looks good on paper, it's zero in action.
But
and I
they've
think that's what we're talking
implemented.
about.
That's why we've seen so much
Have
money
they?
going into the sugar
Have
sector
they? If you
from
don't-
the government.
Eric,
bail
throwing
out
money
this,
at
bail bailout the other,
Throwing
bailout this.
money at something
It's
is
not
not
throwing money at an
implementation.
empty thing. It's throwing money at what has been presented. Oh, this is
Now,
our blueprint.
imagine
Okay,
people
so how
are-
much do you need? 20 billion shillings.
Imagine
to
people are
pour.
siphoning money because that's a mismanagement we're talking about. So now what do? You now
blueprints being
bring
prepared,
them
right?
much more money to siphon
If criminals prepare
without
blueprints,
without lines as to where that money is supposed to go. The same thing will continue happening. Same thing will continue happening. You just now, in fact, you now inject it, siphoning with power foam,
The
and now make
demand
it
for
proper.
sugar in this country is not in doubt.
it isn't.
It's not.
Yes. So how is it then that the sugarcane farmer is a poor person?
And as we see, the private sector comes in and the private sector does.
Well, yes. So
Very
how?
well.
Yes. So
Very
so
well. So there are times here when there's no sugar and you have the neighbors here in Somalia now bringing sugar and it's just going everywhere. How do you explain that? And then it comes in packages of your local sugar companies.
no, there's
Come on.
Nimikora.
Hey, Bana. Let's just say it as it is.
Nimikora. This thing, I don't know. Every time there's a conversation, let's privatize these companies. No, we cannot privatize the company.
And the reason is because every time you hear privatization, look at the African Tours and Hotels, which was a parastatal which was owned by ICDC.
Yes.
What became of it? They had some of the swankiest, some of the best hotels and lodges in the country. What happened? Collapsed, they were bought. What happened? Moribund, meaning at best it has some life supporting equipment attached to it. The privatization discussion in this country, unfortunately, has a very morbid history. And every time that conversation is had, it means there are people who already planned how they want to own these entities and make money from it, because there is evidence that there's money to be made.
They
It has
don't
nothing
even-
to do with the farmer.
They don't want to make money through it. They want to just strip it and bleed it dry.
Make
That's-
money.
that's it.
They want to, yeah.
Because privatization, where you're taking up something to make a profit out of it, you will invest in it.
Let me tell you
Absolutely.
something else
You'll
about
make it
these
work.
factories. Yeah?
You will care.
Forget the outgrower. These factories own land. A lot of it.
Lots of land.
So even if that factory is dead and buried, that land has value.
Yes.
A lot of value.
Yep.
Okay? So, if you're figuring out or you're trying to figure out what exactly is going on, just do the maths.
It's a bad manners that we all have.
It's a
Okay.
1+1 situation.
It's who we are. We talk about now privatizing East Africa Portland Cement.
Yeah,
That's the same thing.
Same story.
It's a real estate company.
Yes.
It's no longer a cement
No,
manufacturing
no,
company. It's
no.
just
That's what the
looking at
discussion.
it as real estate. Okay,
Yes.
so how much land do they have within a very, very viable area?
Exactly.
for-
Very lucrative. And lots of it. Talking 18,000 hectares. How much land do you think that is?
That's a
For
lot
goodness
of
sake.
land. That's a lot of land. Anyway.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.